Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is Jeremy here at Hiltz Machine Works, and I have a new tool in my shop that I wanted to share. Sorry it's been a while since I posted a video, but I've now completed my collection of Palmgren milling attachments. This is the Palmgren 150, and you can see it here. I just unboxed this, came from eBay, and I just have a cheesy setup here right now. I'm going to make a much nicer setup for this milling attachment, but this thing is in really good shape. I don't see damage to the jaws, you know, for the age of it anyway. Very nice, have a small nick there, but it now completes my collection. As you may have seen, I have a video on the 250 and the 450 models of the Palmgren milling attachment, which I'll show you briefly those two right now. And you can see here for scale in front of my Kennedy toolbox that is made by Craftsman back in the day, the two milling attachments of the 150 and the 250. The 450 is behind me on the floor, and I'll show you that afterwards. But this 150 is very small. The 150 means that the jaw width here is only 1.5 inches. And the 250 obviously means it's 2.5, and the 450 is a 4.5 inch jaw. So these are very similar. Of course, they function in a nearly identical way, except the 250 has some upgrades from the 150. We'll see the 150 here just has graduated lines around the top, and you can use this as an adjustment to angle the milling attachment, you know, to make different cuts on the lathe, whereas the 250 has a much nicer scale for you to follow with the graduated lines. It makes it easier for more complicated setups. The 450, as we're going to see in a moment, has 2 bolts in the back to help hold with rigidity and things like that, being a much larger model. But I've always wanted to have the full collection of the Palmgrens for my Logan Lathes, and now I'm happy to say that I have them. And now you can see the 450 next to the 250 and the 150. You see the giant, it looks gigantic compared to the smaller ones. And of course this one I cannot use on my small Logan. I have an 11-inch swing Logan 922 lathe, and both of these work just fine on the smaller Logan. This one is far too small for my larger Logan lathe, which is the 5560 lathe behind me here. This is a 14-inch swing lathe, and it requires the use of the larger milling attachment. And I have the large milling attachment shown in my other video comparing the 250 and the 450 as in action on this machine. Well, let's just take a look again from the side. You'll be able to see the three of them. Just think it's really neat to have the collection. I don't believe that Palmgren made any other sizes of milling attachments. If they did, please let me know in the comments, because if I can use them on the machines that I have, maybe I would get a fourth one if they made it, but I don't believe they did. You can see here on the larger one how it has 2 bolts in the back to hold. You have, again, a much nicer graduated dials and things on these compared to the other ones, and this one has a little bit of flash rust, I think. I'm gonna have to clean that up. But let's throw the little one back on the machine and just take a look at it in action a little bit. If you have a lantern style tool post, you can use that with these. And you see how this goes on here. And then you can just slide something through the lantern post and tighten it down to hold it on there. Now, this used to say something on the top of here. I think it said Palmgren. Yes, I see an AL. It looks like the REN here. Maybe I'll try to replicate that with, you know, some kind of a small paint pen or just using a fine brush, and maybe restore all 3 of these, because you can see that they are a little bit dirty, but they do get used. So I have a chuck in right now. I usually would take the chuck off of this machine, and I would put on my collet chuck, which there are videos on my channel using the collet chuck if you want to see that. I keep the collet chuck down here on my shelf. But let's just take a look at this on the machine. I want to move the milling attachment closer to the chuck. If you didn't have a collet chuck, you can, in a pinch, throw an end mill inside of a 3-jaw chuck and use it. Obviously, you're going to have issues doing that compared to using it in a collet. You're going to have some run out with a 3-jaw chuck, depending on how your lathe is set up. But you know, in a home hobby shop, you could still play around with this milling attachment using just a chuck, but it's much better if you do get a dedicated collet chuck, or if you have a lathe that can take an adapter in the spindle. But you can see the kind of the size comparison. Now this again is on an 11-inch swing lathe. Let me close the lid, and you can see now kind of a good view of that milling attachment on the machine. Now, one of the biggest drawbacks of these milling attachments, of the Palmgren style, is that it does set off the tool post. You can see it has a lot of overhang compared to some of the other milling attachments that were made in this time period. For example, the Atlas Craftsman style milling attachment is better than the Palmgren style in many ways because it doesn't have the overhang. It sits square on the machine. But for what these are, you can do a lot with them, especially if you know how to take light cuts and use your correct speeds and feeds. But you can see as this would come up here, at first I was wondering, would this milling attachment really be useful on an 11-inch swing lathe? Because you can see here, it's fairly above center right now. And depending on what you were had in the jaws, that could be a problem. But this has a lot of travel. And I have not, of course, haven't gone all the way down on my travel, and I'm already down now below center on the lathe. So this 150 definitely will work on an 11-inch swing lathe. It would probably work down to even a 6-inch swing lathe, a very small lathe. I think you could adapt it to work well. If you had a 13-inch swing or larger lathe, I think now at that point you've outgrown the ability to use it. You do have the ability to lock the slide. So let's take a look. Now, I already told you that this is really not a correct way to run an end mill on using a milling attachment, but I understand there's many viewers of this channel who don't have the money yet or the ability to find a collet chuck that fits their machine or collets that they can fit in their spindle taper. So I'm just going to show you that you can use this for certain tasks with an end mill in a 3-jaw chuck using your milling attachment. And you can get by with this while you're waiting to get a more suitable setup. So what I've got here is I'm just threw in a piece of aluminum, and we're just going to show how you could use this milling attachment to just make a cut and face off this piece of aluminum, or if you had another piece of material that you needed to square up, and how it would work. So you can feed in here and then use your cross feed, power feed, or just use your handle if you don't have a power feed on your lathe to make the cut. So you can feed in right here using your compound for how much you want to take off. Now we're just going to bring this in small amount, and let's see it take a cut. And you can see here where we faced it off. Now there was a groove in here. It didn't clean up all the way. That existed before. I don't know if you saw that on the piece. But we could, of course, if we were trying to bring this to a certain dimension, we just continue to feed in. Or you could use the carriage to feed in with the dial indicator. So it's your imagination is what limits you with these little milling attachments. You can do so much with them if you use your imagination. So I hope you've enjoyed just seeing a quick, brief demonstration of this Palmgren 150 and the comparison to the larger ones. Check in soon. We'll have some more videos being posted.